Hello and welcome to Mike's Mets podcast. I'm your host Mike Pashota, and happy Thursday to you. Sorry about the long break. I was away for vacation, and now recovering for what was a really long travel back period. So, enough of that though. Let's talk about the Mets and what was an interesting weekend series and an even more interesting week series against the Los Angeles Dodgers. So, just to recap really briefly, the three-game sweep of the Oakland Athletics. This was a series where the Mets blew out the Athletics in Game One, and then had two much more hard fought battles against the Athletics in games 2 and 3 on Saturday and Sunday. And I don't really know what to say about those games other than it was kind of a mix of everything I've kind of been concerned about with the Mets. But there were certainly things to like. I've liked seeing Pete Alonso sort of break out, and he's off to this incredible start. And it really has to be said that Pete Alonso has been the Mets MVP early on, although there have certainly been other guys who can throw their hat in the ring for Met MVP thus far in the early season. But Alonso has to be considered the top dog as of right now. Off to a great start. Coming off the Dodgers series, he's batting 274, 8 home runs, 15 RBIs, a 978 OPS. I mean, great stats, and this is his best start since 2019, his rookie year. So, what we're seeing right now is a player who is really locked in. He's gotten off to the kind of start that people have been expecting from him. They're expecting him to be this 40 to 45 home run threat while being a dangerous part of the lineup. And what I like is that he hasn't, even though he's been hitting a lot of home runs, he's also been hitting for batting average. He's been walking. He's been basically across the board doing everything that you would ask for from your number four guy. And he's been a critical part of the lineup probably as much as anybody. And you can make the case that he should be in some MVP talks early on this year because he's been a huge part of keeping the Mets afloat, and right now, currently 5 games over 500. So Alonso certainly has won more than one game this year with his bat, and it was a great series that we saw from him. He didn't really do quite as much in the Dodgers series, and I want to talk about the Dodgers, but the biggest thing I've seen from them early on is, once again, the problems with the pitching staff, and there have been just these up and down starts from their starting staff, where you're going to have guys like Tyler McGill turning in one great start, one mediocre start. David Peterson, it's been definitely more troubling. Peterson has not shown what would seem like a consistent approach on the mound, and he has definitely struggled early on. Pearson currently has a 6.1 ERA. He does have 22 strikeouts against 20 and 2/3 innings, but you don't really like what you've seen. And honestly, I don't really like anything I've seen from any of the Mets starters. They all have extravagantly high FIPs this year. This is mostly because they are walking so many batters in this season. They're currently 13th in the National League out of 15 teams in walks allowed. And the starting staff, I mean, guys like Max Scherzer, I mean, he has 9 walks. You know, as you see 9 walks from Scherzer this early into the year, this is it's been pretty unsatisfying. Tyler McGill, a lot of walks as well. Kodai Senga, a lot of walks. And collectively, the staff, the ERA is 4.15, which puts them at 7th in the league. But the FIP is 5.14, and FIP, of course, fielder independent percentage. And this is fielder independent pitching. I don't know why I said percentage, but fielder independent pitching. And this is really what determines how good a starter actually is. And they are all wildly struggling. No more so than Carlos Carrasco, who Mets mercifully put down onto the IL this year, most recently. So Carrasco is in a situation where once Justin Verlander is back, and again, we're hoping that Verlander is back soon, but they had to put him on the IL. He has the bad elbow, not not doing really well. They had to put him on the IL. He has a small bone chip in the elbow, the Post was reporting, and that was causing some swelling and discomfort. And they're giving him an injection. I believe this is a cortisone injection, although it wasn't really clear what they were giving him an injection for. I'm assuming that is the case, to help with the discomfort. But he's got to be assumed to be out for some time, and truthfully, he has not been. He has been the most disappointing part of the pitching staff this year, where you would have assumed he was going to be falling into more of a number 4 spot. He has been early on got to be considered to be the guy who can most easily fall out of this rotation if they had to put him on any kind of waiver pickup or anything like that. They just do not see him as a long-term option, and Verlander would seem to push him out of the rotation entirely unless he comes back healthy and pitching much more sharp. But other than that, I've liked what I've seen from the bullpen in certain pieces. Brooks Raley has kind of come on lately, and he's been pitching much better after a really ugly start. And it can't be stated enough that Raley is a really important part of the Mets rotation. The Mets bullpen going forward. They have what has to be considered a more limited bullpen than they've had in recent years, and that's just because they have a guy who, in their closing spot, who is no longer there, and they have to kind of reshuffle things around. Early on, it's been David Robertson who's excelled in that closer role, and he's done really well. Adam Ottavino has also taken some spots, and the fact that Buck Showalter is kind of switching these two back and forth between the closer role, that Robertson has 4 saves against Ottavino's 3, it kind of shows that I think Showalter doesn't really know who exactly is the guy who has to step up most. Early on, Robertson has looked really good. So far, he has only allowed 1 earned run against 9 thirds innings, and is sporting a really good FIP, 2.15, against an ERA of under 1, 0.96 as of right now. So he's looked sharp. Other parts of the rotation of the bullpen, such as Drew Smith is like all of a sudden really come along, and Smith, again, a guy who is kind of viewed with some trepidation. You have to wonder how well he's actually going to pitch in any given circumstance, but he's looked good for it so far. He currently is leading the bullpen in strikeouts, 12 over 7 2/3 innings. He's been a critical part of the middle relief, especially because guys like John Curtis and Dennis Santana and other sorts have not really looked quite as sharp in that group. So it's been important. They've had to definitely be strategic in terms of who they have available, and he leaned heavily on the bullpen early on this year. He has had to keep using John Curtis, for example, and Raley has gotten probably more appearances than we would probably expect early on this year, but a lot of appearances from the bullpen, and it's one of those things where you don't really want to tax your bullpen this much this early, but it was kind of the expectation where when the Mets were coming out of the offseason, that the bullpen was going to be kind of a weakness. They hadn't really done too much with it. They had not focused enough on the middle relief options, a lot of people thought, and with the Diaz injury, it really threw off everything, where they all of a sudden now had to kind of reshuffle, and everyone got moved up a space, and the end result, of course, is that you're going to be left with more of a gaping hole in your middle relief option, and they've just had to kind of, grit and bear through it as best as they can, and the result is they're playing well, but not as well as you would hope. Now, they came into a big series against the Dodgers. The Dodgers have not been playing well. Coming into the series, they were 8-8. And this is probably the worst start the Los Angeles Dodgers have had in some time, many years at this point. But they were still going to be considered a tough matchup. It was going to be a situation where they were going to be facing some of the top starters on the Dodgers club, with the exception of Noah Syndergaard. And the end result of this all was the Mets splitting the first two games with the Dodgers. They came away with a great Game 1 win on Monday. Tuesday, a shutout loss on the back of a great start from Los Angeles Dodgers starting legend Clayton Kershaw, who picked up his 200th career victory. And we all set it up for this very intriguing matchup between Max Scherzer and Noah Syndergaard, where both starters were former starters for the opposing team. So you had Scherzer, who had pitched half a season in 2021 with the Dodgers, and pitched well in that limited amount of time, but of course had trouble in the postseason. People kind of felt like he had kind of just lost it late in that year, and so that was one concerning thing. And then, of course, Noah Syndergaard, a Mets, I won't say legend, but well-regarded Met pitcher for his time with the club. However, things had not gone off particularly well in the last few years during his run with the team. A lot of injuries, and then left under less than accommodating circumstances. Syndergaard's had a lot of tough words. People didn't really like it, the way he was talking about the team. And the result of it was that I think Syndergaard's kind of on the outs with a lot of Met fans. But it's always nice to see Syndergaard. I kind of get like, oh, it's no Syndergaard. Syndergaard did not pitch well in this game. It was kind of a classic Syndergaard pitching line. He would go 6 innings. Only allowed 5 hits, 2 earned runs, and it should be said this was probably his best start of the season. But he has not done well earlier in this year. He's currently 0-3. He has an ERA of 4.91. And Scherzer was coming into the start, coming off a somewhat mediocre start, and then also had to get his pitching his scheduled start bumped forward so that he was going to be pitching against the Dodgers instead of the Athletics because of some back trouble that he was having. And the back trouble was concerning. People heard that and were like, okay, what's going to happen? How's he going to look on Wednesday when he faces the Dodgers? And honestly, he looked great, other than his first inning, which was a kind of a mess. He allowed hits, didn't really look sharp in that first inning, and kind of weaseled his way out of any trouble. From that point on, he actually looked great though. So he retired at 1.8 in a row, and came out of that third inning looking great. Had only allowed 1 hit, 2 walks, had struck out 3 batters, and it looked like it was going to be a really good start for Max Scherzer. And then Major League Baseball and the umpires got involved and were like, let's screw this up as badly as possible for the Mets. And Scherzer early on had some problems with the umpiring crew, who had felt like his glove and or hand were too sticky earlier in the game, and they had told him that he had to wash his hands, and then at one point even told him to switch gloves. And then coming out of the third inning, he is told once again during the preliminary check that his hands are too sticky. And Scherzer, everyone calls him Mad Max for a reason, flips out. There's no diplomatic bone in Scherzer's body. He is very much a professional baseball player. There's no situation where he's not going to be extremely furious, and was going to speak his mind. And he was basically screaming for, I think, a full minute straight at the umpires, saying, it's just rosin, it's sweat and rosin. It was some combination of the two. I'm still waiting for the official word as to what it actually was said by Scherzer, so I'm waiting for that. But from everyone's estimation in terms of the replay, they could see him saying repeatedly, it's sweat and rosin, it's sweat and rosin. And then Scherzer, even after the game, during the post-game interview, spoke and said, that was basically what he was saying over and over again. It's sweat and rosin, and the result of it is that it's going to get kind of sticky, and he can't really do anything about that. It's the same rosin that Major League Baseball provides, and as he said in the post-game interview, he would be an idiot to try anything at that point because he'd already been told your hands are too sticky. Why would he do the same thing again? He would have to be stupid. So, um, Major League Baseball is really got to look and tell the umpires what to look for in these circumstances. They can't just take that kind of assumption at that point and say, well, your hand's sticky, it must be tack, and not understand the scientific properties of what happens when rosin gets wet, particularly when it mixes with sweat. And Scherzer even said that he was also, putting alcohol on his hand afterwards to help with the process, make sure that it wouldn't stick as much. Obviously, wasn't helping. The end result of this is all that Major League Baseball doesn't really have an idea as to what exactly constitutes an illegal substance, and their only worry really is about people using stuff to keep their hands in the ball and increase spin rate. What other pitchers have been concerned about is how do you keep your hand on the ball if you don't have any kind of substance? And Major League Baseball says, okay, well, why don't you keep your rosin? You can use that, and that's what you're going to have, and that's the substance that you can have and keep that on your hand. Well, then at what point do you say, okay, so what happens when the rosin starts to get kind of sticky on your hand? Do you tell him to wash his hands? Yes, they've done this already. Earlier last week, we had the situation with Domingo Germán, and I'm not going to try and support Domingo Germán because I think he is a POS, but Domingo Germán had a very similar situation happening where he was told, okay, like you have to wash your hands, you can't do that on your glove, and he was basically given a warning, and essentially they were just like, okay, like you're not going to do that again. And Scherzer basically had the same situation happen to him where he was given a warning, he was told, okay, go back in and then come back out again, and basically they did not like what they were seeing from what was on his hands, and that according to the umpire crew, who of course have to kind of defend themselves and say why they felt this was the best course of action, which was we needed to eject him because according to them, his hand was so sticky that when they touched him, they were actually like sticking together, and that's not even like helpful at that point. Like if his hands are that sticky, that ball's gonna go flying everywhere. Like he can't control that. Like if his hands were that sticky, he's not obviously not gonna keep like that. So. And this leads into the other problem that they're going to have, which is that, according to this, there's supposed to be some kind of suspension levied against Scherzer if they think he has to be ejected because he still has an illegal substance on his hands. And Scherzer is going to fight this tooth and nail and basically say, like, they have no evidence other than what was sticky, and he's going to have to say, like, this is what happens when the properties of rosin get wet. It's going to lead to some sticky residue on my hand. I can't do anything about that. It's what they've provided. And Scherzer's been very adamant. He's like, I can't do anything more than what you've told me to do. And like, he did everything that they had told him and asked him to do during that situation, during the game, and apparently was not good enough. The end result of all of this is that Scherzer is ejected through only 3 innings, and Showalter, unfortunately, at that point has to be like, okay, let's get the bullpen working again, and has to have 5 relievers come in and finish the game up. Jimmy Yacobonis would get the win after he pitched 2 2/3 innings. Jimmy Yacobonis, great name, one of the more interesting relievers that the Mets have had, but pitched well, especially that situation where he had to come in emergency circumstances and come in and pitch 2 3/3 innings, only allowed 2 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk. He got them through it, and the rest of the Mets relievers actually not as good as that, I would say. Like Robertson and Ottavino, the 2 best relievers in the Mets bullpen this year, have both gave up runs in the 8th and 9th innings. So it was ultimately a kind of scary situation. The Mets almost blew the game late and led to a situation where it was really only due to a late 2-run hit that provided the Mets with what was basically the game winning runs. So the big performance was from Brandon Nimmo, who uh, it should be recalled, like coming into that road trip against and going on the road to California, was not playing well. He was hitting really bad. Was hitting in the low 200s, and came out of that athletic series looking great. He came up with some clutch hits, home run, was driving in batters and playing great defense, and then comes into this Dodger series and then starts racking up hits, and then all comes to play in this series, where in the final game Nimmo goes 5 for 5. Hits incredibly well in that game. 5 for 5 game, nothing to sneeze at. He's now batting 349. Has a 958 OPS. Is now looking like one of the most dangerous hitters in the team, and you're like, oh, okay, like that's why they give him all that money. Okay, that makes sense. So Nimmo's come on late. I've really enjoyed it. I love seeing Nimmo hitting well and playing well, and he just has a great smile and just loves what he's doing. Great series for Daniel Vogelbach also, who hit that home run game 1. Didn't really do much in the following games, but Vogelbach, good to see him starting to swing the bat a little bit better. And then, of course, we had the call-up of Brett Beatty earlier in the series coming into it. So he comes through in the first game, didn't play second game. And then game 3, 0 for 3. So not looking super sharp early on, but then again, we've just started. And it has to be said, Showalter has to start playing these guys a little bit more regularly, like twice in a row. Stop doing the stop and starts, where he's just he's still trying to keep Eduardo Escobar mixed into it, and Tomas Nido, and Brett Beatty and Francisco Alvarez both need more time to kind of get acclimated and more consistent playing time. You can't do this stop and start situation where Showalter's doing it. And I know Showalter because I've seen him do very similar things last year where Showalter is still trying to find the right combinations. And this is just, I'm going to plug this guy in and see how it works. And if it works, then I'm going to make a note of it, and then I'll keep that lineup combination in mind later on. But early on, struggling in terms of finding the guys he needs to put out there. The guys he doesn't need to be out there are probably Eduardo Escobar and Tomas Nido. Probably guys who need to be in the lineup, Brett Beatty and Francisco Alvarez. And while the two of them have not, as of yet, really kind of shown too much, I liked what I saw from Alvarez in this game. He went 2 for 4. Looked a little bit better at the plate and raised that batting average a little bit more. Of course, this game was really more about Brandon Nimmo, and then in the last inning, Mark Canha, who came through with a 2-run double. And other than that, it's just been guys like Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso getting the big hits. Jeff McNeil has gotten off to a slow start, so has Starling Marte. And these two kind of need to get going sooner than later. It would be definitely appreciated that they start looking like the all-star players that we know they are, rather than these kind of drags in the lineup. And McNeil in particular, after winning the batting title, a lot of pressure on him. He has to start looking much sharper at the play, and this includes him starting to go the other way a little bit more, in my estimation. But great series. They come off with 2 games against the Dodgers. I mean, again, even though the Dodgers have not played well, always looks good to come off a road trip looking stronger than he did going into it. And they're now 12-7. They're still in second place and still well behind the Atlanta Braves, but just the way that's going to fold out because the Braves got such a great start. The Mets were more middling, and we'll see how it shakes up when the Mets finally get the chance to play the Braves later this year. But I'm looking forward to the later parts of this trip. They still have some time to go in terms of what's going to happen with the rest of the season. April, we're more than halfway through the first month of the season, so we're seeing a lot. They have to go through the San Francisco Giants in a 4-game series. Giants have played remarkably well, I would say, like for how badly the team was constructed. I mean, this is a 6-11 team, and the Mets have to be favored in the matchups here, but. Considering that they are 6-11 with starting a team that is just a series of just like guys who are cast-offs, it's not a great team. I would expect the Mets to take that series 3-4, but kind of shakes up to how well everyone is playing in that series. So hopefully they keep the good vibes going into the series against the Giants, and finish off this California road trip in good fashion before making their way back home to play the Washington Nationals. So great to see everything kind of starting to come into place. I would like a little bit more from certain players, but other than that, it's been good going through the first 19 games thus far. Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets Podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike's Mets Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.